The ship came down through red skies. Inside sat Daniel Grant, a human scientist who studied aliens and their languages. He was nervous but excited. This was his first time meeting the Vareth people. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were the race that chose to stop feeling emotions 300 years ago. The landing bay was cold and silver. Everything on this planet seemed to be made of metal and crystal. Daniel stepped off his ship and saw her waiting for him. She stood perfectly still, her skin shining like polished silver under the lights. Her eyes were black and showed nothing. No happiness, no curiosity, nothing at all. Her name was Lyra. She was a commander in the Varath military. The council had chosen her to watch over the human visitor. She studied Daniel as he walked toward her. He was tall with brown hair that fell across his face. His eyes were green. She noted these facts the way someone might note the weather. Just information. Nothing more. Daniel smiled when he reached her. He held out his hand. Lyra looked at the hand for a moment before taking it. His skin was warm. Hers was cool. They shook hands in the human way. "Commander Lyra," Daniel said. "Thank you for meeting me. I'm honored to be here. Welcome to Vareth Prime, Daniel Grant. I will be your guide during your stay. Follow me, please." Her voice was flat. There was no tone to it, no feeling behind the words. Daniel followed her through the station, looking around with wide eyes. Everything was so clean and organized. The hallways were perfect geometric shapes. The citizens they passed moved with exact steps. No one spoke unless they needed to share information. No one laughed or smiled. Over the next few weeks, Daniel explored the Varath world. Lyra went with him everywhere. She answered his questions with precise facts. She explained how her people had decided long ago that emotions were a problem. Emotions caused wars. Emotions made people do foolish things. So they changed themselves through science and training. They removed the ability to feel from their minds. Daniel listened and took notes. But he also did something Lyra found strange. He would stop walking to watch the sunset. He would smile at children even though they were just young citizens doing their lessons. He would thank the workers who brought him food even though they were simply doing their jobs. One day Lyra asked him, "Why do you thank the service workers? They are performing their assigned function." "Thanks are unnecessary." Daniel looked surprised by the question. "Because it's polite. Because they helped me. Because everyone deserves to be appreciated. That is inefficient." "Maybe," Daniel said with a small smile. "But it makes the world a little nicer." Lyra did not understand. Nice was not a concept her people used. Things were either efficient or inefficient, functional or broken. There was no nice. Daniel worked in a research lab. He studied Vareth biology and culture. Lyra sat nearby, always watching. It was her job to make sure the human did not cause problems. But she found herself watching him for other reasons too. Reasons she could not name. He hummed while he worked. Little songs with no words. The sounds served no purpose. They did not help him work faster or better. When Lyra pointed this out, Daniel just laughed. "I hum because it makes me happy," he said. "Happy is inefficient. Happy is wonderful." Lyra wanted to argue. But instead she asked, "What does happy feel like?" Daniel put down his tools. He looked at her with those green eyes. "It feels warm. Like sunlight inside your chest. It feels light, like you could float. It's when everything feels right. Even if you know it isn't perfect. For just that moment you feel good." Lyra tried to understand. She knew warm as a temperature. She knew light as the absence of weight. But this feeling he described made no sense to her. She had never experienced anything like it. "I do not understand," she said. "You're not supposed to understand it with your mind," Daniel said gently. "You're supposed to feel it with your heart." That night, Lyra stood alone in her room. She thought about Daniel's words. She thought about the humming and the smiles and the thank yous. She thought about happiness. Then, without planning to, she started to hum. The sound was bad and broken. Nothing like Daniel's smooth songs. But it was there, something stirred in her chest. Something small and strange. Something that should not exist. The days passed. Daniel taught Lyra about human culture. Not because he had to for his work, but because she kept asking questions. He played her music from Earth. The sounds made no logical sense. Notes went up and down with no pattern. But Lyra found herself wanting to hear more. He showed her human art. Paintings that did not show real things but feelings instead. Colors that represented emotions she had no names for. She stared at those paintings for a long time. He told her stories. Not data files or history reports, but stories. Tales about people who loved and lost. People who fought for things that mattered to them. People who chose with their hearts instead of their heads. Lyra told herself she was listening to study human psychology. But late at night, she would think about those stories. She would wonder what it felt like to be those people. One evening, Daniel brought her something. It was a flower. Red petals like the sunset. He had grown it in the station garden. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Lyra stared at the flower. "What is its purpose?" "No purpose. It's beautiful." "I thought you should have something beautiful. Beautiful is subjective." "It serves no function." "Exactly." Daniel placed the flower in her hand. His fingers touched hers for just a second. But Lyra felt that touch long after he pulled away. She looked down at the flower in her palm. It was fragile and would die soon. It did nothing useful. By every measure her people used, it was worthless. She kept it on her desk. She watched it slowly die over the next week. When the last petal fell, she felt something new. Something painful. She had lost the flower, and the loss hurt. This scared her. She was not supposed to feel pain over a dead flower. She was not supposed to feel anything at all. But she did. She felt the loss. She felt sad. More changes came. When Daniel entered the room, something in her chest would lift. When he smiled at her, she wanted to smile back. When he spoke, she found herself hanging on every word, not for information, but just to hear his voice. She started to notice small things. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his presence. These things had no value. They served no purpose, but they mattered to her. One night they stood together in an observation deck. The city spread out below them, all silver and crystal in perfect order. Daniel looked out at the view and then turned to her. "Don't you ever wonder what it would be like?" he asked. "What would what be like?" "To feel, really feel. To be happy or sad or excited. To connect with someone in a way that goes beyond logic." Lyra knew the answer she was supposed to give, the answer she had been taught since birth. "Feelings are inefficient. They cause problems. My people evolved beyond them. We are better this way." But even as she said the words, she knew they were not true. Not anymore, because she was feeling, every day, more and more. And it scared her. But it also thrilled her in a way she could not explain. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Are you better? Or did you just forget how to be alive?" Lyra had no answer. She stood there in silence, watching the perfect city below. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if perfection was worth the price her people had paid for it. The research center was like everything else on Vareth Prime. Clean, organized, perfect. Daniel spent his days looking at samples and studying the Vareth people. Lyra stayed with him every hour. The council wanted her to watch the human. They wanted to make sure he did not disturb their ordered world. But watching worked both ways. Lyra was observing Daniel. And Daniel was changing her. He hummed while he worked. The same wordless songs that made no sense. Lyra found herself stopping her own work just to listen. The sounds had no purpose. They did not help anything. But they were there, filling the quiet spaces. When she caught herself listening, she would force her attention back to her duties. But it kept happening. One afternoon, she finally asked, "Why do you make those sounds?" Daniel looked up from his microscope. A piece of hair had fallen across his forehead. "The humming? I don't really think about it. It just happens. Makes me happy, I guess. But the sound waves do not improve your work. They serve no function," he smiled at her. She was starting to recognize that expression. It meant he found something amusing or pleasing. Not everything needs a function, Lyra. Some things just are. They exist because they feel good. Feeling good is illogical. Maybe. But it's also what makes life worth living. She wanted to argue with him, to explain all the ways he was wrong. But instead she heard herself ask, "What does it feel like? This happiness you keep mentioning?" Daniel put down his tools. He gave her his full attention. No Varath had ever asked him a question like this before. It's like warmth spreading through your body, like being light enough to float. It's feeling like everything is okay, even when you know it isn't perfect. Just for that moment, you're content. Lyra processed his words. She knew warmth as temperature, light as the absence of gravity, but content was foreign to her. She knew the satisfaction of completing a task. the efficiency of a well-planned day. But this thing he called contentment was different. "I do not understand," she admitted. Saying those words felt wrong. Vareth were supposed to understand everything through logic. Admitting confusion meant she had a flaw. "You can't understand it up here," Daniel said, tapping his head. "You have to feel it here." He placed his hand over his heart. That night, Lyra stood in her quarters. She thought about the conversation. She had wasted time discussing things that had no practical use. She had asked questions that served no purpose. This was inefficient. This was wrong. But as she prepared for sleep, she found herself humming. The melody was rough and broken, nothing like Daniel's smooth songs. But the sound came from her throat. She was making music, and something stirred in her chest, something she had no name for. The weeks continued. Daniel started teaching her about Earth culture. Not for his research, just because she asked. He showed her recordings of human music, orchestras playing symphonies that followed no logical pattern. The sounds rose and fell in ways that made no sense, but they resonated through her in frequencies she felt rather than heard. He showed her paintings. Not photographs of real things, but abstract art. Colors and shapes that represented emotions. Lyra stared at a painting of red and orange swirls. Daniel said it was about anger and passion. She did not understand anger or passion, but something about the violent colors made her feel strange inside. He told her stories. Long tales about humans who loved and lost, who fought for impossible things, who made choices based on feeling rather than logic. Lyra listened with what she told herself was scientific interest. She was studying human psychology. That was all. But late at night, she would think about those stories. She would imagine being the hero who gave up everything for love. She would wonder what that sacrifice felt like. What it meant to care about someone so much that logic did not matter anymore. She did not understand these thoughts. They served no purpose, but they kept coming. One day, Daniel brought her to the station's botanical garden. It was a small space where they grew earth plants for research. Flowers of every color bloomed there. Daniel walked among them, touching the petals gently. "We don't need flowers," he said. "They don't feed us or shelter us. But we grow them anyway. Because they're beautiful. Because beauty matters. Beauty is subjective," Lyra said. She had said this before. It was the correct response, yes, Daniel agreed. And that's what makes it wonderful. Different people find different things beautiful. It's personal. It's individual. It's about feeling, not logic. He picked a flower. It was a rose with petals the color of sunset. He turned and held it out to her. "For you." Lyra looked at the flower, then at Daniel. Then back at the flower. "What is its function?" "No function. I just wanted you to have something beautiful." She took the rose carefully. The petals were soft under her fingers. The stem had thorns that pricked her skin. A small drop of silver blood appeared on her finger. The pain was sharp but brief. Daniel reached out and gently took her hand. He looked at the small wound. "I'm sorry. I should have removed the thorns. It is insignificant. A minor injury," but she felt where he touched her hand, the warmth of his skin against hers, the gentleness of his grip. He held her hand for only a moment before letting go. But that moment stretched in her memory. She kept the rose on her desk. It sat next to her work console, bright red against the silver metal. Every day it grew weaker. The petals began to fall one by one. She knew this would happen. Flowers were temporary. They died quickly. That was their nature. On the 7th day, the last petal fell. The rose was gone. Dead. And Lyra felt something break inside her chest. A small pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. She had lost the flower. And the loss hurt her. She sat staring at the dead rose for a long time. This was wrong. She should not feel pain over a plant. Plants lived and died. That was nature. That was efficiency. But the pain was there anyway. Real and sharp and frightening. Something was happening to her. Something the council would not approve of. The neural conditioning that kept emotions away was failing. The carefully built walls in her mind were cracking. And through those cracks, feelings were seeping in. She tried to stop it. Every night she would repeat the mental exercises she had learned as a child. She would recite the principles of logic. She would remind herself that emotions were weakness. But it did not work. When Daniel entered a room, her chest felt lighter. When he smiled at her, she wanted to smile back. When he spoke, she listened not just for information but for the sound of his voice. These reactions served no purpose. They helped nothing. But they were there. She started noticing details about him. The way his hair fell into his eyes when he leaned over his work. The sound of his laugh when something amused him. The patient way he explained things. The kindness in his voice when he spoke to others. These observations were not analytical. They were personal. She was not studying him as a subject. She was noticing him as a person, as someone who mattered to her. This realization scared her more than anything else, because mattering was an emotional concept, and she was not supposed to have emotions. One evening they stood together on the observation deck again. The city spread below them in perfect geometric beauty, but Lyra was not looking at the city. She was watching Daniel's reflection in the glass. "Tell me something," she said suddenly. "Why do you smile at children? Why do you thank workers? Why do you give flowers to people? What purpose do these actions serve?" Daniel turned to look at her. His green eyes were serious. "They serve no purpose. Not the way you mean purpose. I do those things because they feel right. Because kindness matters. Because making someone else feel valued is important even if it's inefficient. But why does it matter? If there is no practical benefit, why do it? Because we're not machines, Lyra, we're alive. And being alive means more than just functioning. It means connecting with others. It means caring about things that don't make logical sense. It means feeling. My people believe feeling is weakness. Your people are wrong." The words hung in the air between them. No one said the Vareth were wrong. Their society worked perfectly. They had no wars, no crime, no conflict. Everything functioned with exact precision. They were the model civilization. But Daniel stood there calmly, having just called them wrong. And Lyra could not argue with him, because deep down, in places she was only beginning to discover, she agreed with him. Her people had given up something vital, something that made life worth living. They had given up the ability to feel, and in doing so, they had given up the ability to truly live. The summons came on the 73rd day of Daniel's visit. Lyra received the message during her morning routine. She was to report to the council chamber immediately. No explanation given, none needed. When the council called, you went. She stood in the crystal chamber surrounded by the 7 elders who ruled Vareth Prime. Their silver faces showed nothing. Their black eyes reflected only cold assessment. The first elder spoke in a voice that held no emotion. "Commander Lyra, we have been monitoring your neural patterns. There are anomalies. Your brain scans show activity in areas that should be dormant. Explain this." Lyra had known this moment would come. She had felt the changes growing stronger each day. The emotions that should not exist were becoming harder to hide. Her neural implant broadcast her brain activity constantly. The council had seen everything. She could have made excuses, could have blamed equipment malfunctions or external factors. But lying was illogical. And despite everything, she was still Vareth enough to value honesty. "I have been experiencing emotional responses," she said clearly. "Contact with the human has triggered dormant neural pathways. I am feeling emotions." The silence that followed was absolute. To admit to emotions was to admit to failure. To regression. It was the worst thing a Vareth could confess. "You will undergo immediate reconditioning," the second elder declared. "The human's influence must be removed from your system. His presence here has been more damaging than we anticipated." "No," Lyra said. That single word echoed through the chamber like a forbidden curse. Vareth did not refuse the council. Ever. "Clarify your response," the first elder demanded. Her voice was sharp now, almost angry, almost emotional. "I refuse reconditioning. These feelings I have developed are not a malfunction. They are part of what we lost when we modified ourselves, and I believe we made a mistake." The council members looked at each other. This was unprecedented. A Vareth questioning their entire way of life. A commander openly rejecting their authority. The third elder leaned forward. "You would choose emotional chaos over logical peace? You would undo centuries of careful evolution? You would throw away everything we have built?" Lyra thought about Daniel's smile. About the music that made her chest feel strange. About the stories that kept her awake at night. About the rose dying on her desk and the pain she felt watching it wither. About all the small moments that had taught her more about being alive than decades of logical existence. "I would choose to feel," she said quietly. "Even if it brings pain. Even if it brings chaos. Because I have learned something important. Logic without emotion is not wisdom. It is just data processing. We have not evolved. We have diminished ourselves. We removed the best parts of being alive. The judgment came swiftly. Lyra was removed from her command. She was confined to her quarters. She would undergo mandatory reconditioning in 3 days. The procedure would erase the emotional centers that had reactivated. She would be restored to proper Verath function, and she was forbidden from seeing Daniel Grant. All contact with the human was terminated immediately. The Council would speed up his departure. Within 1 week, he would be sent back to Earth. The mission would end early, and Verath Prime would return to its perfect order. Daniel learned about Lyra's confinement from a message on his datapad. 3 lines of text informing him that his liaison had been reassigned. He would have a new guide for his remaining days on the station. He went immediately to the council chamber, demanded to speak with the elders, was refused. He tried to access Lyra's quarters, found his authorization codes blocked. For 3 days he worked frantically, trying to find some way to help her, some diplomatic solution, some loophole in Verath law. Nothing worked. The council's decision was final. On the 4th night, his communication device beeped. A message appeared on a frequency he had taught Lyra during one of their talks about human technology, a frequency the Verath monitoring systems would not recognize. 3 words in simple English. Garden, midnight, please. The botanical garden was empty when Daniel arrived. The earth plants grew wild among the geometric Verath architecture. He found Lyra standing by the roses. She looked different. Her posture was less rigid. Her face showed expression. She looked vulnerable. You came, she said. There was relief in her voice, and hope, and fear. Of course I came. Lyra, what did they do to you? Are you hurt? Not yet. But in 2 days they will recondition me. They will erase what you awakened in me. They will fix me. And I will forget all of this. I will forget you. Daniel stepped closer. His hands clenched into fists. There has to be a way to stop this. I can talk to them. Make them understand they do not want to understand. Understanding would force them to question everything. And they are afraid, Daniel. For the first time in centuries, the Verath Council is afraid. Because if I can change, if emotions can return, then everything they believe is wrong. They stood in the darkness surrounded by flowers and silence. Daniel looked at Lyra and saw not an alien liaison, not a Verath commander, but a person. Someone who had discovered feelings and was about to lose them. What do you want? He asked softly. If you could choose anything, what would you choose? Lyra met his eyes. In that moment, everything she had been taught collapsed. Every rule she had followed, every principle she had lived by, all of it crumbled away. What remained was simple and clear. I want to keep feeling, she said, even if it hurts, even if it is hard. I want to know what it means to be alive. I want to experience everything, the good and the bad. I want... She paused, struggling with words she had never needed before. I want to be free. Daniel reached out slowly. His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. Then come with me. Back to Earth. We leave in 2 days. You can board my shuttle. Once we jump to hyperspace, they cannot follow. You can have the freedom you want. If I leave, I can never return. I will be declared defective. A traitor? I will lose my rank, my position, my home. Everything I have known will be gone. But you will keep what you found. Your ability to feel, your freedom to choose. Isn't that worth more? Lyra looked down at their hands, almost but not quite touching. One small movement would close the distance. One choice would change her entire life. Logic screamed at her to refuse, to accept reconditioning, to return to the safety of not feeling. But something else spoke louder. The part of her that had learned to hum. The part that cried when the rose died. The part that felt warmth when Daniel smiled. That part of her whispered a different answer. She closed the distance. Her fingers wrapped around his. Cool silver skin against warm human flesh. The contact sent something through her like electricity. This was more than just touching. This was connection. This was trust. This was choosing with her heart instead of her head for the first time in her life. Tell me again, she whispered. About happiness. About joy. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. It is warmth in your chest. It is feeling light. It is knowing that in this moment everything is exactly as it should be. Lyra closed her eyes. She felt his hand in hers. Felt the night air on her skin. Felt her heart beating fast and hard in her chest. All of it was real. All of it mattered. Yes, she said softly. I understand now. This is what you meant. This feeling. This is happiness. Yes. Then I will come with you. I will leave Verith Prime. I will give up everything I know. Because this feeling, this happiness, it is worth more than all the logic and order my people have built. I choose to feel. I choose freedom. I choose you. Daniel pulled her into his arms. The embrace was awkward at first. Lyra did not know how to hug. Her people did not touch except when necessary. But she learned quickly. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. We leave in 2 days, Daniel said quietly. Can you get to the landing bay without being detected? I have a plan. The security systems have patterns. I know how to move through them. I will be there. It is going to be dangerous. If they catch you, I know. But I am not afraid. Or rather, I am afraid. But I am choosing to do this anyway. That is courage, yes? Feeling fear but acting despite it? Daniel smiled against her hair. Yes, that is exactly what courage is. And you are the bravest person I have ever met. They stood together in the garden while the night deepened around them. Above them, stars shone through the dome. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was a future neither of them could predict. It was uncertain and frightening and wonderful. For the first time in her life, Lyra was choosing her own path, and it felt right in a way that logic could never explain. The escape plan was simple to understand but dangerous to execute. Daniel's shuttle was scheduled to leave in 36 hours. If Lyra could reach the landing bay undetected, she could board before the final security check. Once they cleared Verath airspace and jumped to hyperspace, the Council would have no power to bring her back. But simple did not mean easy. Every hallway on the station had cameras. Every citizen's location was tracked and logged. Lyra's neural implant sent her position to central security every 3 seconds. The moment she left her quarters, alarms would sound throughout the entire facility. Unless they had a reason not to sound. Daniel spent the next day preparing. He made a show of finishing his research. He requested files and interviewed scientists. He acted like he planned to work through his last night on the station. What the security systems did not see was the virus he uploaded into the network, a piece of code that would loop Lyra's location signal. It would show her safely in her quarters while she made her way to the shuttle. Lyra prepared too. The medical staff came to run tests before her reconditioning. They mapped her brain, identified the emotional centers that had awakened. She submitted to every scan. She gave every expected answer. She acted like she had accepted her fate. Inside, though, she was memorizing patrol routes and calculating distances. She was planning her escape. The night of departure arrived. Daniel completed his final reports and packed his equipment. He said polite goodbyes to the Verith scientists who had helped him. No one suspected anything. Humans were emotional, but they followed rules. He would leave, Lyra would be fixed, and everything would return to normal. At 2 a.m, the virus activated. Lyra's location signal began its loop. She slipped from her quarters through a maintenance tunnel she had discovered weeks ago. The corridors were empty. Most of Verith Prime was in sleep cycle. She moved quietly, using all her military training. Every sense alert for patrols she might have missed. The trip to the landing bay should have taken 12 minutes. After 9 minutes, she heard voices ahead. Security guards discussing the shift change. Lyra pressed against the wall and calculated. Every detour would cost time. Every delay increased risk of discovery. She made her choice and moved. The alternate route took her through the environmental control section, a maze of pipes and equipment that few people ever used. Her uniform caught on a sharp edge and tore. Her hand slipped on a wet surface and scraped against metal. Pain shot through her palm. She stopped and looked at her hand. Silver blood welled from the scrape. The pain was sharp and immediate. A Verith would note the injury and continue, but Lyra felt more than the physical sensation. She felt the sting. She felt her body's reaction. She felt alive. The pain was proof that she was becoming more than what she had been, proof that feelings were real. She wrapped her hand in cloth torn from her uniform and kept moving. When she reached the landing bay, Daniel was waiting by the shuttle ramp. His face was tight with worry. When he saw her torn uniform and bleeding hand, his expression changed. Concern flooded his features. "You are hurt," he said, reaching for her. "It is minor. We must board before..." The alarms began, a loud wailing that filled every space on the station. Lyra's neural implant suddenly burned with pain as emergency protocols overrode the virus. The system located her true position and locked onto it. She gasped and stumbled. Daniel caught her. Override code Delta 79, a mechanical voice announced throughout the bay. Commander Lyra, you are ordered to stand down. Unauthorized departure is prohibited. Comply immediately. Daniel half carried her up the ramp. How long until they can stop us? Emergency protocols can seal the bay doors in 90 seconds. We need clearance codes to launch. I am not asking for permission. Daniel got her into the co-pilot seat and dove into the pilot's chair. His hands flew over the controls. The shuttle's engines roared to life. The sound was beautiful and terrifying. Through the viewport, Lyra saw security forces running into the bay. The massive blast doors started to close, heavy metal panels sliding together to seal the exit. The opening was getting smaller with every second. The shuttle lifted off. The acceleration pushed them back into their seats. Daniel angled toward the narrowing gap. Lyra looked at the closing doors and did quick calculations in her head. They were moving too slow. The gap was too small. Physics said they would not make it. She reached over and grabbed Daniel's hand. Not to stop him, just to be connected. If they crashed, if they were captured, at least they would be together. At least she would have tried. At least she would have chosen. The shuttle scraped through the closing doors with almost no room to spare. Metal screamed against metal. Warning lights flashed on every panel. Then they were through, bursting into the red sky of Verath Prime, the planet falling away beneath them as they climbed toward space. Behind them, the Council sent messages. Demands and threats, and finally pleading. Return the shuttle. Return Commander Lyra. This was theft. This was kidnapping. This violated every diplomatic treaty. Daniel ignored all of it. He focused on the navigation display, counting down seconds until they could engage the hyperspace drive. Lyra watched her homeworld shrink in the viewport. Down there was her entire life. Her career and her quarters and her place in society. She was leaving all of it behind. For what? For the ability to feel? For the chance to be free? Any regrets? Daniel asked quietly. His eyes stayed on the controls. Lyra thought about the question. Regret was an emotion, one she had never felt before. She searched inside herself. Past the fear and the excitement and the pain, she found something else there. Not regret. Something better, hope. No, she said. No regrets. The hyperspace drive engaged. Reality bent. Stars stretched into lines of light. They jumped away from Verath Prime, leaving it behind. Leaving everything behind, they were free. The journey to Earth would take 18 days through the commercial shipping lanes. Daniel's shuttle was not built for long trips. They would have to make do with cramped quarters and limited supplies, but neither of them cared. They were alive. They were together. They were free. For Lyra, every moment was a revelation. Without the Verath conditioning, without the neural implant sending compliance signals, she experienced emotions in their raw form. When she looked at the stars through the viewport, she felt wonder. When the recycling system broke down, she felt frustration. When Daniel told a bad joke, she felt amusement bubbling up inside her. And fear. So much fear. Not of being caught anymore. Fear of the unknown future stretching ahead like dark space. On Verath Prime, every day had been planned. Every action prescribed. Now she was flying into nothing with no plan and no certainty. What will happen when we reach Earth? She asked one evening. They were sharing a meal in the tiny galley. Will your people accept me? An alien who broke her own laws? A defector? Daniel set down his ration pack. I do not know. There will be questions. Diplomatic problems. Some very uncomfortable conversations. But Earth has something Verath Prime does not have. What? Choice. You can decide who you want to be. You can figure out what these feelings mean to you. You can build a life on your own terms. That is terrifying. Yes, but that is also freedom. Lyra considered this. Freedom was not a concept in Verath vocabulary. They had purpose, function, efficiency, but not freedom. The idea that she could simply choose without guidance or orders was as alien as emotions had once been. Will you help me? She asked quietly. To learn how to be this new person? Daniel took her hand across the small table. The gesture had become natural over the past days. The simple contact that meant connection and comfort. Every step. Though I should warn you, I am not an expert. Humans spend their whole lives trying to understand emotions too. But you have always felt them. It is natural to you. Understanding and managing are different things. Emotions can be complicated. They can hurt, but they can also be amazing. He squeezed her hand gently. And you are not alone. On the 16th day, Lyra stood in the observation area watching stars drift past. Daniel found her there. He noticed the tension in her shoulders. What is wrong? He asked. I received a message from the council. They found a way to transmit through the relay stations. She pulled up the holographic text, geometric Vereth script glowing in the air. They are offering amnesty. If I return now, they will not punish me. They will complete the reconditioning as planned. I can go back to my old life. As if none of this happened, Daniel's face hardened. What do you want to do? The logical choice is clear. Return, resume my position. Continue serving Vereth Prime. I was good at my job. I had purpose. Everything I have now is uncertain. But Lyra turned from the viewport to face him, and in her silver eyes something impossible appeared. Tears. They slid down her cheeks. Silver drops on silver skin. The first tears she had ever cried. But I do not want logic anymore, she whispered. I want this. Even though it hurts. Even though I am terrified. Even though I have no idea who I am becoming. I want to feel, Daniel. I want to keep feeling. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. Lyra stiffened for just a moment, then melted into the embrace. She felt his arms around her, felt his warmth, felt his heart beating against her cheek. This was comfort. This was support. They stood together in the observation area for a long time, just holding each other while stars wheeled past outside. Finally, Lyra pulled back enough to look up at Daniel. Her face was still wet with tears. What is this? She asked. This thing between us. This connection. Is there a name for it? Daniel smiled. That expression she had learned to love. There are many names: friendship, trust, affection. He paused, then spoke softly. When people care about each other very deeply, when they want to share their lives together, humans use another word. What word? Love. Lyra felt the word on her tongue. Love. She had studied it in her research files months ago. The definition said it was deep affection and care for another being. An emotional bond marked by attachment and warmth. But the clinical definition seemed too small for what she felt. Is that what this is? She asked. Love? I think so, Daniel said. If we let it be. Lyra thought about the rose he had given her, about the music that made her chest tighten, about the stories of heroes making impossible choices, about standing in the garden and choosing to feel, about every moment since then that had led her here. Then let us, she said simply. Daniel's breath caught. Then slowly, giving her time to understand, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, a touch as light as a petal. Lyra had read about kissing in her cultural studies. She understood it as a human expression of affection, but reading about it and experiencing it were completely different things. She felt everything. The softness of his lips, the warmth of his breath, the way her heart raced, the way her skin tingled, the way her entire being focused on this single point of connection. It was inefficient and impractical and completely unnecessary. It was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, Lyra was shaking. Is it always like that? When it is right? Yeah, then I understand now. Why humans write songs about this. Why they make art and poetry. Why you call it love. Daniel cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs gently wiped away the silver tears that still fell. There is something I wanted to say before, but I was afraid it would sound empty to someone who could not feel. But now I can say it. Say it, Lyra whispered. He looked into her silver eyes. He saw not an alien or a Vereth commander, but a person. Someone who had risked everything for the chance to feel. Someone who had chosen uncertainty over safety. Someone who had become fully alive. You are beautiful, Daniel said softly. Not just how you look, though you are, but your courage, your honesty, the way you embrace everything with such wonder, the way you experience the world with such intensity. You're beautiful, Lyra, and I love you. Lyra felt something break open in her chest, a warmth that spread through her entire body. This was joy, but also more than joy. This was being seen, being valued not for what she could do, but simply for existing. This was what humans meant when they said someone mattered. I love you too, she said. The words felt right, felt true, felt like the most logical thing she had ever said, even though logic had nothing to do with it. 2 days later, they reached Earth. The blue and green planet grew in the viewport like a promise. Lyra stood beside Daniel in the cockpit, her hand in his, watching her new home approach. There would be challenges ahead, questions to answer, a life to build from nothing. But she would not face it alone. The Council sent one final message as they entered Earth's atmosphere. A simple statement of fact. Commander Lyra was declared legally deceased. Her name was removed from all records. She had never existed. Lyra read the message and deleted it. They were right in a way. Commander Lyra, the efficient, emotionless tool of Vareth Prime, was gone. But in her place was simply Lyra. A person who felt, who chose, who loved. And that was more than enough. The shuttle descended through white clouds toward green land below. Cities appeared, oceans, mountains, all the beautiful chaos of a living world. A world where emotions were not weakness but strength. Ready for your new life? Daniel asked. Lyra smiled. The expression came naturally now. And she realized she was crying again. But these were different tears. Not sadness or fear. These tears came from being overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. The beauty of choice. The beauty of feeling. Yes, she said, I am ready. They landed at a spaceport outside a city. Real grass grew around the landing pad. Real trees swayed in real wind. Lyra stepped off the shuttle onto Earth soil for the first time. The air smelled different here. Rich and alive. The gravity was slightly lighter than Vareth Prime. Everything felt new. Daniel took her hand. Welcome home. Home. Another word that had no real meaning on Vareth Prime. They had dwellings and assigned quarters. But home was different. Home was where you belonged, where you were safe, where you were loved. Lyra looked at Daniel, then at the blue sky above, then at the green world around them. This place was strange and foreign. She knew no one here, had no job or purpose or assigned function. Everything was uncertain, but Daniel was beside her. And she could feel. She could experience joy and fear and love and wonder. She was alive in a way she had never been before. Yes, she said quietly, I am home. The following weeks were hard. Government officials questioned her for hours. They wanted to know about Varath technology and politics. They wanted to understand why she had defected. Some of them looked at her with suspicion. An alien who betrayed her own people. Could she be trusted? Daniel stayed with her through all of it. He spoke on her behalf. He vouched for her. He never left her side. Slowly things settled. The officials decided she was not a threat. She was given temporary asylum while they processed her case. She was allowed to stay on Earth, to start building a life here. She got a small apartment. Daniel helped her furnish it. They picked out furniture together. She chose things not for efficiency, but because she liked them. A soft couch, colorful curtains, pictures for the walls. Making these choices felt strange at first. Then it felt wonderful. She learned about Earth culture, about the thousands of different ways humans lived. Different foods and music and customs, so much variety, so much individual choice. It was overwhelming and beautiful. She got a job at a research institute. They were fascinated by her knowledge of Varath biology. She helped them understand alien physiology. She was good at it. But more importantly, she enjoyed it. Work was no longer just a function to perform. It was something that gave her satisfaction. She made friends. Other researchers at the institute. They invited her to meals and social gatherings. At first, she did not understand the point of sitting together and talking about nothing important. Then she realized that was exactly the point. Connection did not need a purpose. It just was. One evening, 6 months after arriving on Earth, Lyra stood on her apartment balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Daniel stood beside her. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Do you ever miss it? Daniel asked. Vareth Prime, your old life. Lyra thought about the question. She did miss some things. The clarity of purpose. The simplicity of a world without emotional complexity. But would she trade what she had now to get that back? No, she said. I do not miss it. Sometimes I think about it. Wonder how things might have been different. But I do not want to go back. This life, with all its uncertainty and complexity, is better. Because I get to feel it. Daniel put his arm around her. She leaned into him, comfortable with the closeness now. Any regrets? Only one, Lyra said. What? I regret that my people cannot experience this. that they will never know what they are missing. They think they evolved beyond emotion, but they just made themselves smaller. They removed the best parts of being alive. Maybe someday they will understand. Maybe you leaving will make them question, make them wonder if they were wrong. Maybe, Lyra said. She did not really believe it. The Vareth were too invested in their way of life to change. But maybe one day. They watched the sun sink below the horizon. The sky darkened. Stars began to appear. Somewhere up there was Vareth Prime, her homeworld, the place she could never return to. But here on Earth she had found something better. She had found freedom. She had found love. She had found herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For teaching me to feel. For showing me there was another way. For giving me the courage to choose." Daniel turned her to face him. He looked into her silver eyes, still amazed by how much expression they held now. "You did not need me to teach you. You had it in you all along. You just needed permission to let it out. Then thank you for giving me permission." He smiled and kissed her, and Lyra kissed him back, pouring all her newfound emotions into that simple gesture. Love and gratitude and joy and hope. All the things she had never felt before. All the things that made life worth living. When they pulled apart, Lyra was crying again. Happy tears that she no longer tried to hide. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood together on the balcony as night fell. Two beings from different worlds, connected by something deeper than logic or function or efficiency, connected by the most powerful force in the universe. The ability to feel, the courage to choose, the beauty of love. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Commander Lyra's name was erased from Vareth records. But here on Earth, Lyra the person was born, alive, free, feeling beautiful.